You see me? I'm the only one. I can see the others. But... Yes, Joseph, how are you?
Okay. Good morning, Joseph. Good morning, Joseph. Good morning, Prof. Mrema. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Good morning,
Oh,
Mark.
okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Good morning, Prof.
Morning, Joseph. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Yeah.
Good morning, Joseph.
Good morning, Mark. Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Fine, thank you. I just want to check.
Yeah.
Do you have Dr. Patrice Tala online so we can start?
No, I can't see him. Let me check. Speak. Okay, no. It's a bit difficult to see.
Look under attendees.
Excuse me, Mark. Hello. Is it Patrice Talla?
Yes.
Okay, he's in the attendees. I will promote him as in panelist.
Okay.
Okay. He's rejoining.
Okay.
Thank you
Great.
so much.
You're welcome.
So, good morning, colleagues. Good afternoon.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be, and welcome to the fourth in the series of webinars on joint actions on operationalization of the framework for sustainable agricultural mechanization in Africa. This framework was jointly developed by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and the African Union Commission. And we are gathered here now to have this fourth webinar. And this meeting is going to allow us to have a discussion and also to promote agricultural mechanization in sub-Saharan Africa. At this point, I would like to invite the FAO Sub-Regional Coordinator for Southern Africa, who is also the FAO representative for Zimbabwe and Eswatini, Dr. Patrice Talla, to give us his opening remarks. Patrice, please.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you, and good morning, colleagues. Good morning, friends. So it's a great pleasure for me today to be with you and to the opening of this webinar. So Dr. Sampis Nwala, who is the head of the Agriculture and Food Security Nutrition at the African Union Commission, Mr. Saidi Komwa, the Executive Director of the African Conservative Tillage Network, Professor Geoffrey Mrema, Agricultural Mechanization Expert at the Sokoine University of Agriculture, Morogoro, Tanzania, Professor Linus Opara, Professor at the South African Research Chair in Port Harvest Technology at Stellenbosch University, South Africa, Professor Lawrence Kumbe, Mechanization Expert at University of Nairobi, Kenya, Professor Muzukure Linus Opara, Distinguished Professor at the Stellenbosch University, South Africa, Dr. Alun Fal, the Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Forum of Agricultural Research for Africa, FARA, and former Director of the Senegalese Institute of Agricultural Research, Israel, Mr. Helmut Hans-Schwartz, Team Leader of the Zambian German Agricultural Knowledge and Training Center, FAO colleagues, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. So it is my greatest pleasure to welcome you all to the fourth webinar in a series of webinars on the joint actions on operationalization of framework for sustainable agricultural mechanization, FSAMA. So this webinar is organized jointly by the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, the African Union Commission, AUC, and the African Conservation Tillage Network. I am pleased to see that we have such a good turnout, and I thank you very much for attending this webinar that will focus on the impact of paradigm shifts on the development of agricultural mechanization in sub-Saharan Africa. I am also glad to note that we have an array of participants from the public and private sector, farmers and farmers organizations, development partners, NGOs, researchers, and academia. And this is important as it helps to create a participatory environment for the development and promotion of mechanization in sub-Saharan Africa. Also, I would like to thank the organizing team for inviting me to give these opening remarks. So, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we are privileged in this fourth webinar to have the keynote paper and presentation on impact of paradigm shift on the development of agricultural mechanization in sub-Saharan Africa, a case study of farm power by Professor Mrema. The topic will be discussed from a wide range of perspectives, given the diversity, knowledge, and experience of our panel of 4 distinguished experts on the topic. We are indeed fortunate to have this heavyweight, and we thank them all for agreeing to contribute to this webinar. In this 4 webinar, we are also privileged to have a highly distinguished panel of presenters and discussants sharing their rich experience and expertise that will contribute to efforts to promote and develop sustainable agricultural mechanization in Africa. I have no doubt that their expert inputs will enable us to understand the key paradigm shifts in the development of agricultural mechanization, especially farm power in sub-Saharan Africa. Critical lessons on research and development, especially capacity development and the role of the academia, as well as the right policies to support innovations, financing, and upscaling of agricultural mechanization in sub-Saharan Africa. This webinar is timely considering that the 31st session of the FAO Regional Conference for Africa, which was held in October last year, emphasized the need for increased production and productivity in Africa in agriculture by accelerating the access and use of mechanization, digitalization, and other appropriate technologies. Similarly, the discussions here will contribute to the African Union's 2014 Malabo Declaration call to accelerate agricultural growth through, among others, facilitating suitable, reliable, and affordable mechanization and energy supplies. So the paradigm shift discussions relate to how sub-Saharan Africa has been analyzing and learning from its own experiences on sustainable agricultural mechanization, as well as integrating that with external advice to arrive at new philosophical frameworks to be used to advance sustainable agricultural mechanizations in the region. It is important to consider the eternal advice while striving to integrate it in the context of our local experiences. So the 2 frequent changes in policies supporting sustainable agricultural mechanization in sub-Saharan Africa have had dire consequences in scaling adoption. So this webinar will awaken the realization on the need to address challenges and opportunities related to the promotion and development of sustainable agricultural mechanizations along the food value chain. It is very important that the challenges are tackled and good practices are shared and scale up to fully unlock the potential of the agricultural sector on the continent. I believe that this webinar will ignite the spark among the sustainable agriculture mechanization stakeholders to critically evaluate the data and methodologies forming the basis of any significant national program or strategy recommendations, as well as identify and publicize success cases to enhance development, promotion, and scaling of sustainable agricultural mechanization in Africa. I kindly count on you all to actively participate in the discussions. Let us all commit to play our part in ensuring coordinated and sustainable mechanization in our spheres of influence. On behalf of the organizing team, I would like to once again thank all of you for participating. I will look forward to the fruitful deliberations and recommendation that will follow. With these remarks, it is now my pleasure to declare this webinar officially open. Thank you for your kind understanding.
Thank you very much, Dr. Patrice Talla, for opening the workshop for us and also for underlining the critical importance of agricultural mechanization towards the attainment of the global goals on agricultural productivity and ending hunger in Africa. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this event has mobilized a very high level experts, very high level panel of experts who will give us the presentation, the keynote presentation, which will be given by Professor Geoffrey Mrema. Where the presentation from Professor Mrema will be followed by inputs and discussions from 4 high-level experts: Professor Linus Opara, Professor Lawrence Gumbe, Dr. Alion Thal, and Mr. Helmut Anschutz. They are the 4 panelists, high-level experts, who will discuss and contribute to the presentation from our lead presenter, Professor Mrema. Now, before I go to Professor Mrema, I would like to inform you that interpretation in French and English is provided, so you can click on the globe icon on the bottom right of your screen and select the appropriate language accordingly. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, let me invite Professor Geoffrey Mrema, who is an agricultural mechanization expert and consultant with the Sokoine University of Agriculture in Morogoro, Tanzania. Professor Mrema will give us a presentation on the impact of paradigm shifts on the development of agricultural mechanization in sub-Saharan Africa, a case study of farm power. Prof. Mrema, you have the floor, please.
Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I'm supposed to talk today on the paradigm shifts. The paper has been posted on the website, Africa Mechanized website, and therefore you can access it later on. But my talk is basically on the topic as given there: paradigm shifts and development of agricultural mechanization in sub-Saharan Africa, a case study of farm power. Could I go to the next one, please? Whoever is okay. I think as an introduction, the development of agriculture in sub-Saharan Africa using higher levels of farm power has had a very checkered history over the past 7 decades, from 1945 to 2015. Agricultural mechanization, although very widely supported in sub-Saharan Africa by farmers, national leaders, and politicians, it has, however, been a controversial issue in quite some circles, especially among external experts and commentators. The objective here is to really provide a summary view of the paradigm shifts which have occurred in relation to the role of farm power in agriculture over the period of 1945 to 2015. The evolution of agriculture, next please, the evolution of agricultural mechanization is captured in that slide, where you have 4 phases. Phase 1 is pre-1960, the colonial period. Phase 2 is 25 years between 1960 and 1985, the first quarter century after independence. And third phase is second quarter century after independence, between 1985 and 2010. And the final phase is the one which you are in now, from 2010. Next slide. Can you, okay. Now, I'll go first of all to 10 elements of summer, which I think we are this subject discussion. There are 10 elements under this summer. The first one says boosting farm power through appropriate technologies and innovative business models. The second one, promoting innovative financing and mechanisms for agricultural mechanization. The third one, building sustainable systems for manufacture, distribution of agricultural mechanization inputs. The fourth one, sustainable mechanization across agri-food chains. The fifth one, innovative systems for sustainable technology development and transfer. And the sixth one is a sustainable transformation of land preparation and crop and animal husbandry practices. And under socio-economic sustainability, we have social sustainability and the roles of small-scale farmers, women, and youth. And element 8 is human resources development and capacity building for SAMA. And finally, we have the overarching elements, this need for long-term vision, policy and strategy, creating sustainable institutions for regional cooperation networking. Now, I'm talking only on the element number 1, and I'm focusing on the paradigm shifts which have occurred over the last few years in terms of increasing the farm power use in our agriculture. Now, the role of farm power in increasing agriculture productivity globally was first really highlighted by Professor Guys of North Carolina State University, who noted that in a seminal paper that farm power with fertilizers, high-yielding varieties, improved seeds, irrigation, and pesticides are interdependent for growth in agricultural productivity and overall production. This was the first study which systematically did link the use of farm power with increased yields, especially as led to the Green Revolution of 1960s, which occurred in Asia and Latin America mostly. This was premised on the success of the Green Revolution in 1970 in Asia, had been attributed mostly to the use of high-yielding varieties, fertilizer, and irrigation, and the contribution of farm power was not factored in then. So the mechanization experience of USA and Europe during the preceding 5 decades supported the Guy's hypothesis. And according to Smith, I think in a study 2000, it did call the tractor as the unsung hero of 20th century US economic and agricultural growth, where it replaced 24 million draft animals during the period of 1925 to 55. And similar developments did occur in Europe between 45 and 65, which were significantly actually assisted by the USA-funded Marshall Plan. So at independence 1960, the advent of mechanization in developing countries of Africa, Latin America, and Asia was then equated to tractorization. And this was taken for granted by most development experts and the politicians. Therefore, the first paradigm for mechanization was in the 1950s and 60s. It did postulate that the provision of power for field operations like land preparation would be through mechanical technologies like tractors, without necessarily evolving through a transitional stage of using draft animal power. For sub-Saharan Africa, this was quite was seen then as a feasible option, with a continent with land abundance at that time, in many countries, and the difficulties of finding alternative sources of farm power. We had a low population, which made the hand-tool technology not a viable option. And the prevalence of fly made the use of draft animals difficult in large areas of sub-Saharan Africa. So the development programs of most countries in Africa in the 1950s and 60s, which were prepared by the departing colonial authorities with the assistance of major multilateral development agencies like FAO, World Bank, were based on this paradigm. Okay, go ahead. Next slide, yeah. So we assumed that the use of tractors will become quite widespread through direct ownership of the tractors by farmers, or through hire services owned by public or private sectors. For Africa. For Asia, I think that we had several centuries of experience of using draft animal technology, and the farm power debate there was more on replacement of draft animals in field operations, increasing use of electrical and diesel pumps in irrigation, and post-harvest processing equipment like threshers, motorized, etc. For sub-Saharan Africa, the situation was different. Large parts of the continent were cess infested, and are still cess infested, so it was difficult to keep livestock, except in areas where pastoralists resided. So crop production was dominated by the cutlass and hoe cultivation. So the debate was whether sub-Saharan Africa should move directly to tractors and bypass, leapfrog the draft animal technology or evolve through it. But I think the political desire for rapid mechanization was supported throughout sub-Saharan. So the early paradigm was quite highly supported in most of sub-Saharan Africa. However, can you go to the next slide, please? However, there were some concerns that this rapid tractorization was a bit too much, and concerns were raised by several influential people and organizations on the impact and efficacy of tractorization in developing countries. And this included the intermediate technology movement, which advocated for a more evolutionary approach through the so-called intermediate or appropriate technologies. Then another sister UN agency, the International Labour Organization, ILO, which was very concerned about the effect of tractors had on the employment of rural laborers, and it did prepare several papers for all the 4 continents urging caution on tractors. There were also environmental movements by several groups who were concerned about the impact of tractorization on the environment. And there were also socio-economic concerns related to equity issues, fate of peasants, and so forth. So these issues were raised, and there are also quite a concerted move against rapid tractorization in Africa. In order to bridge the gap between these 2 groups, FAO, together with the Organization of Economic and Cooperation, convened an expert consultation in Rome in February 1975 to resolve the issues involved. The consultation recommended selective or appropriate mechanization, which combines hand tool, animal, and mechanically powered agricultural implements and equipment suited to the physical, cultural, economic, and technological environment of the country concerned. So this was the consensus reached in Rome in 1975. There was also a consensus on manpower requirements for mechanization and the need to treat farm power as an input in agricultural production, just like fertilizers and seeds. FAO was requested to develop guidelines to help member countries in developing their agricultural mechanization strategy. And FAO did develop these guidelines and through very wide consultation. And these were released in 1981. And they have been implemented in quite a number of countries since then. And I think everybody thought the debate had been closed. We are now moving forward with this consensus, the Rome consensus. However, next one. A new paradigm emerged in 1985, and this was proposed, mostly originating from a group in the World Bank, and they linked the development of agricultural mechanization in sub-Saharan Africa to the evolution of farming systems as the systems intensify from shifting cultivation to permanent production systems. This was the period of farming systems research, and farming system was in vogue throughout Africa and the developing world. This paradigm attributed the lack of progress in mechanization in sub-Saharan Africa to, among other things, the government-dominated tractorization programs of 1960s and 70s. And an accompanying study which was published by the World Bank in 1987 did recommend a shift of assistance from tractors to draft animal power in all mechanization programs for countries which were seeking assistance from the World Bank. The World Bank was then very powerful in terms of influencing agricultural policy in African countries. There followed then a wave of relatively well-funded draft animal power programs and networks throughout Africa, which were implemented for much of the 1990s. However, by 2005, it became apparent that the draft animal power programs and networks were not the panacea to the mechanization problem of sub-Saharan Africa. While at this time, tractor imports had significantly declined in all countries of the continent. The new paradigm and policy implemented, therefore, had significant impact on the use of tractors in between 1995 and 2015 as compared to other regions of the world. And if you look at the figures here, next. If you look at the graphs on there in front there, you see that in 1961, Sub-Saharan Africa had almost the same. The Sub-Saharan is the third one. The first one, the blue, is Asia. The second one is North America. The third, yellow, is Europe. Red there is Latin America, and Near East is the blue. Now, in 1961, we were almost at the same level in terms of tractor use, number of tractors in use. By 1970, Asia had moved up. We had also moved up to beat ourselves. That's all. And Europe had moved, and North America had continued to advance. By 1980, Asia had moved out quite significantly, the blue line, and we were still at the low levels. And the Latin American, Caribbean, as well as Near East were progressing. And by 1990, we were still stuck at very low levels, while both Latin America, Asia were progressing were increasing their tractor fleet quite significantly. Next one. If you compare, for example, this number of tractors in use in Sub-Saharan Africa with those of, say, for example, specific countries, Brazil, yellow, China, green, India, red, dark brown, and Thailand, sort of lighter brown, and Sub-Saharan Africa, blue there, including South Africa in this case. You see there, Sub-Saharan Africa had quite a high level number of tractors in 1960 compared to all these other countries. But 1970 we still had fairly high numbers of tractors. But by 1980, the other countries had moved up very fast: India, China, Brazil. And by 1990, again, they had moved even more higher. By 2000, and even Thailand, by 2000, Thailand was having more tractors than Sub-Saharan Africa, the whole continent, including South Africa. So you could see the impact this had on the tractor fleets in Sub-Saharan Africa. Next slide, please. Now, if you look now, the proportion of land cultivated by different sources of farm power at the turn of the century, 1998, Near East and North Africa region, where 60% was cultivated by tractors, 20% by hand hoe. Latin America, Caribbean, 50% tractors, 35% the red one, hand hoe. South Asia, 40% tractors, 30% draft animals, 30% tractors. East Asia, 20, 40, 40. Sub-Saharan Africa, only 10% tractors, 25% draft animals, and 65% human master hand hoe, the hand tool technology. Next slide. So we are really down in terms of compared to earlier. If you compare within the continent, the Central Africa region was the worst one actually, with 85% of the land still being cultivated by the hand hoe by 2006, and only 4% by tractors and 11% by draft animals. Western Africa with 70% hand hoe, 22% draft animals, 11% tractors. Southern Africa, 54% hand hoe, 21% draft animals, 25% tractor. But this is largely because of the influence of South Africa, which had a higher mechanization level compared to other countries in Africa. In Eastern Africa, 50% hand hoe, 32% draft animal. Again, here is influence of Ethiopia, which had a tradition of almost spanning several millennia of using draft animals, and only 17% on tractors. So again, we are most behind. If you look at tractor imports, by 1970 for Sub-Saharan Africa, excluding South Africa, by 1970, early 70s, 72, 73, 74, we were importing around 10,000 tractors per year, the whole region. But the numbers started nosediving from 1980s, and by the 2000, we were importing less than 2,000 tractors per year. So you can see the effect of these policies, the paradigm shift on our capacity to import. And I think most of it this time we were implementing the structural adjustment programs. So we had very little room to maneuver other than follow the rules which were dictated from outside. Go ahead, next slide. And if you look in other regions of the world, tractors now look at Thailand, it's all growth. If you look at the first graph there, it's Thailand two-wheel tractors. They moved from 200,000 to almost 1.4 million, while ordinary four-wheel tractors, four-wheel tractors, they moved from 20,000 to almost 140,000, the same as the whole of South Africa. The same thing, Pakistan again moved from 100,000 to 300,000. India moved from 500, half a million tractors to 2 million tractors within the same period. So really, again, the other regions were progressing. We were actually stagnating, if not declining, in terms of use of this important mechanical piece of equipment. Okay, next slide. So that's why then when we drafted the framework for sustainable agricultural mechanization in Africa, I think it became very clear that we, following the re-examination of the whole process of agricultural mechanization development on the continent, which started from 2008, and it culminated with the approval of the summer framework in 2018. So the first priority element was given as boosting farm power through appropriate technologies and innovative business models, which emphasizes countries in Africa. I think this has to be, and that's why it's called a framework. Countries in Africa are at different stages of development and with regard to use of farm power. Therefore, you cannot prescribe, you cannot have a blanket prescription for the whole continent to farm power situation. We have to judge each situation according to the individual local situation, the particular district, the particular region, as the economies progress. Now, the key objective of the framework should be to increase the farm power available to all farmer groups, be they small farmers, medium, or large scale, and then to significantly reduce the use of hand tools, specifically to reduce drudgery in farming in Southern Africa. And this follows the call by the African Union, and heads have said that at least we should try and banish the hand hoe for major operations of farming in Africa by the 2025. And increasing availability of farm power could be through farmers' ownership machines or by mechanization's higher service providers. Next. Now, there were other issues which were raised also, which are important, environmental issues and farm power. But I think we have to note that enhanced adoption of conservation techniques requires sustainable provision of farm power. This is important. So tackling farm power constraint is also critical for environmental sustainability. There is also the issue which is being brought by some people that we should focus more on small tractors, large tractors, rather than large tractors. But I think we've had several waves of small tractors being promoted in Africa. But we recommend that this issue should be based on fundamental principles of soil mechanics and engineering to decide the level of tractors and implements to be used. Because I think the small tractors are not the panacea to the African problem. The situation here is very different. While small tractors work very well in Asia, the situation in Africa is quite different. And then we also need to talk of the institutions and organizations for boosting farm power in sub-Saharan Africa. We need to strengthen the divisions of agriculture mechanization and engineering services. We know that most countries have now got these divisions in their government departments. And we also need to consider sub-regional and regional mechanisms for things like research and development, I think, and also even some of the franchises for distribution of machinery and trading. We may have to consider sub-regional mechanisms to increase efficiency and attain economies of scale and scope. And also, farm power sustainability is need to facilitate commercial provision of mechanization services through viable enterprise. This is very important. And in this regard, we might have to consider seriously migratory provision of services within countries and across countries. This may be necessary to achieve economies and viable utilization rates. So, in conclusion, next slide, we need to invest more in human resources development and knowledge generation on agriculture mechanization in sub-Saharan Africa. I think one of the biggest issues here is that if you go to Asia, you find hundreds of dissertations, MSc and PhD dissertations on mechanization issues, different as from socio-economic, from engineering and so forth. Africa, you find very few. I think we need to invest more in this line of resources, at least generation of knowledge as well as training our human resources. We also need to consider sub-regional markets to attain economies of scale and scope. And given our very small national markets at the moment, we need also to factor in the environmental concerns, which are very critical, but the farm power problem has to be tackled first. And I think the environmental concerns are more an issue of the implements, and these are tackled under element number 6 of FSAMA. And but the farm power is critical as a critical need first. And then we need to invest in regional mechanisms for information exchange and learning from each other. And here we should emphasize we need to support the Africa Mechanized Platform, which is bringing us together in this webinar and this series of webinars. So this is an innovative idea. Let us support it and try to use it to learn from each other our experience of agricultural mechanization. Mr. Chairman, I think Sub-Saharan has to succeed in increasing the power available for agriculture. We have to do it through sustainable mechanization service to all its farmers, whether small scale, large scale, medium scale. And this is inevitable. And I think the tractor is the basic machinery for that. It has not to be deviated again into experimenting with things which have not worked in the past on this continent. We have experienced now that we've had more than 70 years experience of experimenting so many of these types of other equipment that we need to move forward and look forward and focus our attention on what can work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Geoffrey Mrema, for this wonderful presentation. So the impacts of paradigm shifts on the development of agricultural mechanization, and we have looked at specifically at farm power. At this point, I would like to bring in our distinguished panelists, and I would like to first start with Professor Linus Opara, who is a distinguished professor from Stellenbosch University, South Africa, and president of the Pan-African Society of Agricultural Engineering. So, Professor Opara, you have heard the presentation from Professor Mrema, and the question that I would like to ask you, and which is the same question that the other distinguished panelists will also answer, is to tell us one key lesson that we should learn from the past experiences, and also what one key strategic action you would recommend for sub-Saharan Africans countries to take in order to avoid the past mistakes. So one key lesson and one strategic action that we should take to avoid the past mistakes. Professor Opara, please. Do we have Professor Opara? Okay, let me go to Professor Gumbe, Professor Lawrence Gumbe then, who is agricultural mechanization expert at the University of Nairobi, Kenya. So Professor Agumbe, you heard the question that I asked earlier. Based on the presentation from Professor Mrema, what will be one key lesson that we should take, and also one key strategic action that sub-Saharan African countries should take in order to avoid the mistakes in the past?
Okay, thank you very much for your attention. First of all, agriculture is practiced in society by farmers, and farmers are in agriculture to make a living, and they are there to make a living which is as best as possible for the times. In other words, farmers need to develop whatever they are doing. So the consumers of the farm power use it to produce, and when they produce, they are needed to reproduce themselves by earning as much profits as possible. Now, what has happened in sub-Saharan Africa is that we have had a mishmash of approaches to farm mechanization. And the mistake, in my view, which was made is that mechanization of farms and application of farm power was viewed as a standalone activity. In my view, it should be part of a broader industrialization policy. It should be part of, for the African Union, Vision 2063. And for a country like Kenya, it should be part of Vision 2020, such that if you want to provide tractors, then you must have a way of local manufacture of tractors, and you must have a way of creating employment in that manufacture. As Professor Mrema said, if you bring machines to a place and displace labor, it must go somewhere. And it logically, if it's a country which is industrializing and is balanced, then that labor will go to that particular place. So one lesson is that we must anchor agricultural mechanization strategies on our overall Vision 2063 or 2030 of Kenya of industrializing, and make it an integral part of industrializing the country, including industrializing agriculture. That's my way of looking at it.
Thank you very much, Professor Kumbe. So mainstream agricultural mechanization strategies within the broader industrialization agenda at continental level, but also at country level. Thank you very much. Let me go now to Dr. Alion Fowl, who is the chairperson of the FARA Board of Directors, and also the former director general of Senegal's National Institute for Agricultural Research in Dakar, Senegal. So Dr. Fowl, you have also had the presentation. What is your take on the key lesson? What is the key lesson that you take from the presentation? And what will be a strategic action that you would also recommend for African countries?
Giving me the floor. And I noticed that listening to the professor who had made a very good study, this is really a state-of-the-art of agriculture mechanization in sub-Saharan Africa. You notice that during the presentation, and also reading, those who have the chance to read the paper of the professor, they notice that a lot African scientists are not really involved in most of the studies. And I think that African scientists need to be part of the development and promotion of agricultural mechanization in this continent. Also, listening to the presentation, it's clear that when you look at the references, most of them are external experts. And external experts, most of the time, they decide what agricultural mechanization should look like in Africa. Just look at the references, those who have the chance to read the paper, that less than 10 African scientists in the list of more than 120 authors, meaning that basically most of the studies are based on external experts who come to Africa and analyze very quickly. They don't have time to really get deeper in the farming systems, in whatever happened in Africa. And to me, sometimes they made some mistakes, and in terms of analysis. So a lot of mistakes have been made in the past. So what I'm thinking is to develop mechanization strategy based on appropriate technology. Most of the time when they say appropriate technologies, we have to know what we mean by appropriate technology. You know, for me, appropriate technology means the technology which is technically feasible. It has to be technically feasible that in the country we can manage the technology. It also had to be economically profitable, because if you want to change something happening, you have to do something which is better than what we find on the field. So it had to be, at least on the economy side, to be profitable. Another point is it had to be socially acceptable. If you bring in a technology which, you know, generates some conflicts in the social aspects, it doesn't work. So that technology needs to be socially acceptable and, you know, and also environmentally sound, something which can degrade, you know, the soil or whatever happening in this environment. And I guess, you know, for me, I think that for each sub-Saharan African countries should develop its own strategy of agricultural mechanization to be based on resources available in the country, keeping in mind to put in place a sustainable strategy. This strategy must be elaborated in collaboration with the policymakers and should at least take into account creation of mechanization division, you know, in the country, you know, to coordinate at the country level, and also have an R&D framework to get all the actors involved in the process, do testing of agricultural machinery before, you know, saying that we're going to disseminate these tractors or we're going to disseminate this animal traction ground implement. We have to do testing of the machinery and the implement, improvement of the mechanization environment, training of all actors, have physical policies, have credit and subsidies, capacity building of all the participant institutions and local SMEs considered to be viable local manufacturers. Also,
Right.
we should have an alignment with the sub-regional and regional organization in charge of the animation between sub-Saharan Africa, and also know that in African Union, we have at the Malawi Declaration, you know, the agenda, also to have be aligned with the agenda. I guess that's my thought for, you know, what we should be doing now if we want agricultural mechanization to prosper in sub-Saharan Africa.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fall. So in the past, we have not involved African experts. Let us involve them now as we move forward. And also in terms of looking at appropriate technology, we should look at different dimensions. The technology should be technically feasible, should be economically, socially, and environmentally sound as well. In fact, these points are also well elaborated in the framework for SAMA. So thank you very much for emphasizing those points as well. Now I want to bring in Mr. Helmut Anschutz, who is the team leader of the Agricultural Knowledge Training Center in Zambia. What is your take on the presentation, please, Helmut?
Yeah, thank you for having me on the panel. My key lesson learned from the presentation of Professor Mrema is that the use of tractors has not increased in Africa or sub-Saharan Africa. And yeah, of course, the question is why? And according to our observations here at the training center, mechanization is a very complex issue. You need to take into account the land. The land must be suitable for mechanization. For example, no roots must be there. You need suppliers of spare parts, fuel, inputs to repair the tractors. And that makes the whole mechanization very complex. And according to a study we have done at AKTC, the age of the average farmer is 51. But while Zambia or all other African countries have a very young population. So I conclude that not enough young people who are capable of using the new technology are involved in farming. If we see our trainees from the universities and colleges, Later on, they will end up in extension services in the government, but very rarely on farming. So the strategy could be to make mechanized agriculture more attractive to young people. And also all the education sector should already beginning in school to get young people familiar with technology and to make the agriculture more attractive to young people, so that they do practical farming and that they feel as businessmen and not as agriculture as a punishment. These are some of the observations we did here. So that would be a way for strategic action to increase mechanization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helmut. So take advantage of agricultural mechanization to make agriculture more attractive to young people also to come in. Thank you very much. Now, I want to come back to you with specific questions, and I'll start with you, Dr. Fowle. So one specific question to you is that we know that African governments have been stepping up efforts to transform agriculture, as recognized in continental level and reflected in the Malabo Declaration. I think quite a number of you have made references to the continental agenda. Now, from your point of view, what is the fundamental cause of Africa's lagging behind in farm power, and how could it be addressed for Africa to efficiently and effectively mechanize? So what is the fundamental cause, and how can we address the challenge? Thank you, Dr. Fowle, please.
Yeah, thank you for this very important question. I mean, just look at the African continent and the sub-Saharan Africa. The introduction of engine power equipment or tractors, let's say tractors, because usually when you say engine power, we refer to tractors, was mainly driven by the colonial power interests. If you come to West Africa, they say Senegal is dedicated to produce groundnuts with a wide use of animal traction only. If you come in the peanut basin of Senegal, that's where you find all the animal traction, draft animal in that area. They went to Mali and say, well, we need Mali to grow rice. If you go to Nyono, Nyono have 1 million hectares of potentially irrigated rice, meaning that Mali, all the mechanization were really thought, towards rice production. If you go to Ivory Coast, they say cocoa production, those are the way, the colonial interests were, reasoning agriculture mechanization in Africa. And most of the equipment were very specific to crops. And that been really a problem where when now after independence, you want to get agriculture mechanization to develop, you are somewhere tied in between the crops and the type of equipment which is existing. And after the independence, multi-engine power farm equipment introduced in African countries were tied to terms of bilateral cooperation between countries. If you remember, when we got independence, definitely the government in place were looking for, help from, in the bilateral cooperation. And I recall that even small tractors and power tillers were all from China. Most of the newly independent countries have a lot of power tillers coming. Dengfeng, that brand from China, you can find in Senegal, in Gambia, in Guinea-Bissau, wherever you go, Chinese, small tractor, because it was in the bilateral. And rice equipment for Japan. I remember the Kubota in 1984, we have a set of equipment coming from Japan, and you can name, you can look at all the African countries because of the bilateral cooperation, we are all oriented in one type of equipment. And that situation was really something we find not very good, because when the equipment broke down in the field and stuff like that, there are no spare parts. You know what I'm talking about. Those people who know about agricultural mechanization, that we have a lot of power tillers just laying on the floor. So total dependence on imported spare parts, leading to tractor cemeteries throughout sub-Saharan Africa. Because of that type of cooperation, no spare part, not sustainable, spare part existing in African countries. You just have cemeteries of agriculture equipment, farm equipment laying around in all sub-Saharan Africa. We also have very unskilled people in charge of the program. They don't know what is agriculture mechanism. That was just, we are not trained yet, because university, the professor said about masters and PhDs in Asia and stuff, to be trained to that professional level. But at that time, Africa, we didn't have very skilled people in charge of agriculture program. No national strategy regarding agriculture mechanization. We were just taking the equipment coming from wherever the equipment was coming. No plan, no strategy, no nothing. And yeah, now we can see that that was very bad for Africa. And research was mainly conducted by external experts, just like I said, with no real connection to the reality of local farming system. When we are talking about local farming system, we have some basic questions we are asking ourselves and working with farmers. And we have two basic questions. First, we have to understand why farmers do what they are doing. You cannot just come and say you're going to help the farmers and you don't understand the rationale which is behind what the farmers are doing. Because if you want to improve, you have to understand why the farmer is doing what he's doing right now. Who are the beneficiaries of the technology or innovations? You just don't come and bring in a tractor and you don't ask your question, who are really the real beneficiaries? So I guess at that time, experts did not take enough account the large variability existing among agroecological zones. You don't come in the country and say this level, everywhere you go is the same. No, if you come to Senegal, what is happening in the river basin is completely different from what is happening in the south in Casamance. The type of equipment is completely different. Now, if you bring in an expert who's national usually, they cannot apprehend all these questions. The efficient way to address the question of agricultural mechanization right now is to elaborate a national strategy to promote agricultural mechanization. The national strategy has to be elaborated. To reinforce research, to test newly introduced equipment to be sure that we respect the standards and this equipment is really adapted in the local condition. We have to build capacity of all actors. Just don't come in and say, well, this is a piece of equipment, I'm going to use it, but you have to be trained, you have to be really put in a situation where you can use it. Improve the environment of the technology. When you say improving the environment, you should have availability of spare parts. And be sure that simple parts, especially wear parts, has to be fabricated in country. Because those are the parts who really, on a year time, just go worn, so you have to change them. Also create networks at the sub-regional level to exchange experience among countries. I guess those points are very important if really, if you want to correct those mistakes in this time of the century. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fowl, for that insightful experience that you've shared. So the colonial legacy has contributed to the problem, and you have outlined clear actions that need to be taken, including developing a national strategy, investing in research, building capacity, and creating the right environment for the adoption of those technologies. Thank you very much. And let me now go to Professor Gumbe. Prof, sustainable agricultural mechanization has been promoted in sub-Saharan Africa by governments, development partners, NGOs, using different philosophical thrust or paradigms, as we have heard from the presentation from Professor Mrema. So when you look at all this, would you say that the lack of structured debate, critical thinking, and not having our own agenda in sub-Saharan Africa has been a cause for Africa to have the least mechanized agricultural system in the world, as we saw from the presentation? Please.
Yes, that is quite true. Not having had a structured conversation on this issue for 60 years has definitely affected us. And it is something which we should remedy. But I think the even bigger problem is that we have not enunciated a vision of where we want to go, what we want to do. All these arguments that Professor Mrema was saying, which I've been talking with him for the last 40 years. What kind of agriculture do you want? What kind of person do you want in agriculture? What kind of incomes do you want them to have? What kind of diet do you want them to have? Such that in Kenya, for instance, I heard, was it Helmut who said that the average age of a farmer in Zambia is what, 51? The average age of a farmer in Kenya is over 62 years. 62. It's not that attractive to young people because the incomes basically are not, cannot sustain the kind of lifestyles they want to lead. So it is the vision of where we want to go, which is much more important. Then we can have the structured discussions on how to achieve what we want. In other words, we must have a vision, we must have a policy, then we must have strategies to reach that policy. And having a continent-wide discussion about these things is important. Having a vision of Africa, for instance, around the time just before we were born, we had the Kwame Nkrumahs having visions of Africa. We had the Jomo Kenyattas and Ufwe Bwanyis having a different vision, and they had conversations. They were not able to negotiate some common ground for Africa, some common policy. So this now, at least luckily we have, however we can criticize it, at least now in Africa we have Agenda 2063. It is something negotiated, we can critique it, but at least it is something we can work on. On mechanization, we have another one now. And then the various countries also have their various visions. So we are going in the right direction. And the conversation, as you alluded to, must be completely structured, completely principled, and leading us in the same direction, and completely, as they were saying, completely led by Africa for Africans. Because if it is led by other people, they will be pushing their agenda in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Gumbe. So we should be clear about our vision. Where do we want to go? And once we have clarity on that, we should have a structured discussion which will help us to come up with the right policies, the right strategies, and how to implement them. Thank you very much, Professor Gumbe. Let me bring in Helmut, please. So having heard all that has been said already, and as looking at the issue from the perspective of a private sector investor, what are your strategies to harness and advance mechanized farming for the majority of smallholder farmers as the target groups in Africa, looking at it from the private sector side? Helmut, please.
Yeah, maybe starting with some background about AKTC. At AKTC, we are based on the Golden Valley Agricultural Research Trust in Zambia, and we are having field demonstrations on 100 hectares of land, out of which 72 hectares are irrigated and 28 hectares are dry land. On the irrigated land, we do field demonstrations on wheat, soya, and potatoes. And the irrigated land, wheat, soya, potatoes, and maize, soya, and cover crop on the dry lands. AKTC is part of the bilateral cooperation program of the Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture. And we have 10 private sector partners. So we have investors, we call them private sector partners, who are supporting AKTC with agricultural machinery, agricultural inputs, and agricultural advice. And working with these investors who play the major role at AKTC, these investors have, of course, an impact on how AKTC is managed. And these private investors follow basically 3 different strategies in order to support the mechanization in Zambia, respectively in Africa. Strategy one is to supply state-of-the-art machinery to work on these 100 hectares I mentioned, and to train the farmers with state-of-the-art machinery. In general, small farmers do not have access to tractors, implements, and inputs for training purposes. At least in Zambia, we do not find any training institutions which cover the needs of already mechanized smaller farmers or farmers who intend to mechanize. Therefore, farmers usually venture into mechanization without any preparation. When buying a tractor, for example, the dealership only provides a short introduction to the complex technology of a tractor. This is, I compare it, or I like to compare that with buying a car. The car dealer is not taking care of your skills. He is not giving you the driver license. The dealer is not giving you the mechanical skills. You have to take care. In this case, the farmer has to take care to gain the skills on his own. So in this gap, the private sector partners of AKTC try to bridge by providing tractors, implements, and inputs for training. The farmer who gets trained has access to modern agricultural technology. He learns how to operate and use machinery and inputs without risking or misusing his own valuable machinery and inputs. After attending the training, the farmer should be confident enough to use the machinery in the correct way. And in addition, he is competent enough to make the decision which machinery to buy for his farming purposes. This is strategy one. Strategy two is selection of trainees. The private sector partners, of course, are supplying machinery and inputs free of charge to the training center. And therefore, they expect trainees to attend who in the long run will purchase agricultural equipment. And because of the nature of their business, the investors are only interested in getting serious farmers to the trainings. A farmer participating at AKTC trainings is not getting any allowance. According to the status of this farmer, he has to pay for his own transport, for his food, and for his accommodation at the training center. And we believe by sharing the costs of a training, AKTC ensures only to attract serious farmers who are prepared to actively come to collect the knowledge in order to improve on their farming skills. So the selection of trainings is the second strategy. The third strategy are the trainings themselves. It's agreed with the private investors that trainings at AKTC have to be hands-on, and they have to be by farmers for farmers. So all trainers at AKTC have a private sector as well as a farming background. So they speak the languages of the farmers on the ground. And it doesn't matter how big the farmer is, being it a smaller farmer or a larger farmer. And the trainings are conducted with the machinery and inputs supplied by the private sector partners. The aim of the training is the correct maintenance and usage of the machinery and implements. I want to give you 3 examples. Tractor maintenance. It's quite common that
you can summarize that, please.
Yeah, all in all, the 3 strategies of the private sector partners regarding to support the mechanization of smaller farmers in Zambia or in Africa in general are a holistic approach which includes hands-on training on machinery, hands-on training in production, and this is supported by farming as a business training in order also to understand the economics behind farming and to base the farming decisions on an economical background as well. That's it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Helmut. So you have actually emphasized the importance of trainings for the farmers as beneficiaries of agricultural mechanization. So training, which is hands-on and practical for farmers by farmers, and also in identifying the right type of farmers who will be able to make use of that training. Thank you very much for that experience. So at this point, let me open it up and go to our more than 170 participants here to give them the opportunity to also ask questions. So please, you can raise your hand and ask your question to Professor Geoffrey Mrema or any of our high-level discussants that you have heard from. I looked at the chat and saw one comment from Professor Emmanuel Bobobi from Ghana. He's my former professor from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. And he was emphasizing the point about the lack of a critical mass of experts in agricultural mechanization, and therefore having other people and development partners take the lead in developing strategies for agricultural mechanization. So I think he was buttressing the point made by Professor Mrema on the human resource capacity that we need to build in agricultural mechanization. Thank you, Prof Bobobi from Ghana. Okay, so who do we have? I do not see. Okay, let me see the hands. I see hands here. So first of all, let me call Samba Kante. I see your hand up. Please go ahead and ask your question, and please go straight to the point because we are a bit behind schedule. So go straight to the point, ask one question and indicate to whom you are asking the question, please.
Merci beaucoup. Joseph, je vous remercie. Vous me contraignez à poser une seule question à qui l'adresser. Je ne sais pas à qui l'adresser, je l'adresse à l'ensemble des intervenants. Mais la question, c'est de dire comment aujourd'hui les professeurs qui sont en Afrique, qui ont des connaissances solides en mécanisation, peuvent aider l'Afrique à former des ressources humaines, mais ce n'est pas former seulement les ressources humaines. Sur le plan institutionnel, comment asseoir des institutions qui vont prendre en charge la formation des ressources humaines? Il ne s'agit pas d'avoir des chercheurs seulement. Il nous faut, sur l'ensemble des échelons, c'est-à-dire depuis le niveau de chercheurs jusqu'au niveau du conseiller en machinisme agricole en passant par les techniciens supérieurs, essayer de trouver des institutions de formation pour ces ressources humaines. Je pense que l'Afrique est en retard par rapport aux autres continents sur le plan agricole, effectivement lié à l'équipement, mais derrière cet équipement, c'est un déficit de connaissances, c'est un déficit de ressources humaines qui se pose. Au-delà de ça, donc, je voulais avoir l'avis, en tout cas des panélistes, sur cette question de comment asseoir des institutions capables de prendre en charge la formation de l'ensemble des acteurs, et ils sont nombreux, qui doivent concourir à l'utilisation des machines. De ce point de vue, j'aimerais bien qu'ils n'oublient pas la formation de base pour tout agronome africain par rapport à un minimum de connaissances.
Okay.
Merci.
Right. Yeah, Samba, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think your point is made. Your point is made. So the question is, how can we institutionalize the trainings for the capacity development in agricultural mechanization that we are talking about? Thank you. Let me go to Hassan. Hassan Munir, please. Please go straight to the point, to your question. Hassan?
Oui, bonjour madame. Donc, vous m'entendez? Allô?
Yes, I can hear you.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, je suis du Maroc. Donc, je suis directeur général délégué du groupe Cousimar. Donc, c'est un groupe qui produit le sucre au Maroc. C'est un opérateur unique. Mais je voudrais, à travers mon intervention, faire un témoignage et peut-être vous aurez la réponse à un certain nombre de questions, notamment la disponibilité des pièces de rechange, la maintenance et le comment réussir la mécanisation. Vous savez, notre groupe, en 2008, toutes les opérations exceptées l'opération de préparation des sols qui était mécanisée, mais toutes les opérations, donc le semis, le traitement phytosanitaire, la récolte, le chargement, et toutes ces opérations étaient manuelles. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on avait comme difficulté? D'abord, les rendements étaient bas quand on se compare avec la France et l'Allemagne. Et du coup, la culture de la betterave dans notre pays est devenue en quelque sorte non attractive par les agriculteurs. Et donc, nous avons pensé immédiatement à faire comme les autres, donc mécaniser l'ensemble des trains techniques. Et donc, nous avons mis en place une stratégie, parce que réussir la mécanisation ne peut pas venir seulement avec la sensibilisation, la communication. Non, il faut des actions précises et importantes. Donc, qu'est-ce qu'on a fait? Puisque la plupart des agriculteurs qui travaillent avec nous, ce sont des petits agriculteurs, et donc ils n'ont pas la possibilité ni l'accès à la mécanisation, ni sur le plan financier, ni sur le plan technique. Et donc, qu'est-ce qu'on a eu l'idée de créer, d'aider à la création d'un certain nombre de sociétés qui font la prestation agricole pour les agriculteurs qui sont nos fournisseurs de matières premières. Et donc, à date, nous avons créé dans l'ensemble des régions dans lesquelles nous opérons 260 sociétés. Mais nous étions derrière. D'abord, c'est le plan administratif, un accompagnement financier aussi, et un accompagnement technique par la formation. Donc, nous avons formé tout ce monde-là. Donc, aujourd'hui, 260 sociétés, c'est presque 1500 personnes entre techniciens et ingénieurs qui opèrent dans le domaine. Ils ont été formés et ils continuent à subir des actions de formation.
Hassan, can you go straight to your question, please? So what is the question that you want to ask?
Non, je n'ai pas de question. J'ai un témoignage qui peut répondre à tous les soucis de mécanisation, si vous permettez. Maintenant, si vous n'avez pas le temps à me consacrer, moi, je vous remercie.
Okay.
Comme vous voulez. Est-ce que je continue?
No, but thank you very much. That was very useful inputs, also emphasizing the importance of the training. So that point is well made. Thank you very much, Hassan. Let me go to Misiko. Misiko, please.
Merci.
Thank you so much. Mine is a comment. One of the things that I missed from the presentation, and particularly to Professor Mrema, is the need for budgeting in national budgets, recurrent budgets, to ensure that mechanization is part of the national agenda, and also the failure to mention, and I know Professor Mrema very well, he knows this, the public-private partnerships around mechanization. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Misiko, for emphasizing public-private partnerships. Let me go to Naima Shikawi.
Oui, bonjour. C'est Bourarache, j'ai eu du mal à changer mon nom. Alors, je voudrais simplement rajouter à ce que dit M. Georges Mrema concernant la circulation du matériel et des tracteurs entre régions et entre pays. C'est quelque chose de très important, surtout au début de la motorisation. Les agriculteurs n'arrivent pas à valoriser le tracteur, à l'utiliser pendant un nombre d'heures suffisant. Et donc, il faut, pour que le coût de la mécanisation ne soit pas élevé, il faut donner cette possibilité de travailler d'une région vers une autre et également travailler dans des pays frontaliers. Ça permet de valoriser plus le tracteur. Donc ça, c'est une idée très intéressante, vu que pendant le début de l'introduction du tracteur, le nombre d'opérations n'est pas élevé et donc le nombre d'heures d'utilisation est faible. Si.
Okay, thank you very much, Naima, for that contribution. Let me take one from well, I don't have a name. I have ProBook 450. So please go ahead, ProBook 450. Okay, I think we don't have him or her, so I'll go to Bra Nuri. Bra Nuri, please go ahead and ask your question. Hello? Okay, so then let me go to Edem Apewokin. Edem, please ask your question. Edem Apewokin.
Hello? Yes. Should
Hello?
I go ahead or should I wait for the other person?
No. Right. So
okay,
Bra Nuri, you are ready now. So please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, I'm ready. So I'm Edem, joining from Ghana. And thank you for highlighting the importance of agric mechanization. My question is that what support is there from FAO and other agencies, including through PPPs, for implementing agric mechanization?
Edem, I can hardly hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
It's very faint. Can you speak closer to your microphone, please?
Can you hear me now, please? Is it better, please?
Yes, it is. Please go ahead.
Yes, it is.
So sorry, I said I'm Edem, joining from Ghana, and thank you for highlighting the importance of agric mechanization. My question is, what support is there from FAO and other agencies, including through PPPs, for promoting agric mechanization? I work with animal farmers, and we are looking to ways to mechanize, including in silage production and feed harvesting and things like that. So I wanted to know what supports, what agencies can help. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Edem, so your question is, what support can FAO and other organizations provide? Okay, thank you. Bra Nuri, you are ready now. Please go ahead with your question. Right, I think he's ready. So we go to Martha. Martha, please go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon. I would like to thank all the presenters for those.
Martha, your voice is very faint. Can you speak closer to your microphone, please?
Okay, okay. Do you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, yes. I would like to thank all the presenters and just want to make some comments that in mechanized agriculture, we need to take seriously the conservation aspect, because you realize sometimes when the tractor operators are in the ground, you find they are doing it and they are not even taking care of any vegetation at those sites. You find there is massive clearing of trees, and even bigger trees are cleared. And really that disturbs the farmer, who understands that those trees are supposed to be there, much as the food needs also to be grown in such environments. So my advice is, we need to encourage the environmentalists and the agronomists during the plowing or opening of the what? Of the plowing of the gardens or the acres, so that they can be able to share together. We've had this experience in the ground. Actually, we have a project where we're opening over 100 acres of land for farmers. and we engage the private partner to open up the land. But it was so disheartening that they would really do it without taking conservation of some of the trees that existed in place. So mine is we need to emphasize the integration of these environmentalists together with the agronomists. That is what will make us succeed. The other one is involvement of the laws.
Martha.
Yes.
Martha, thank you. Thank you very much for that contribution, emphasizing the need for us to look at conservation when we are talking about agricultural mechanization. So thank you very much. I still see quite a number of hands which are up. Unfortunately, our time is limited, so I will not be able to take all those questions, but please do well to put your questions in the chat. We will collect them and ask our experts to provide responses, which we will share with you. So please put your questions in the chat. Because of time, we will not be able to take all the questions from the people who have indicated they want to ask questions. So let me now go to our panelists. So Prof. Mrema, I'm coming to you. The first question from Samba Kante was about how we should institutionalize this whole issue of training and capacity building. Please.
Number of training institutions in the region, regional ones and national ones. And the key issue is networking them so that at least you have people learn what is going to be emphasized and so forth. I think one thing which you should, I should just maybe deviate a bit here and say is Dr. Fall did mention one thing. Out of the references which are cited in the paper, about almost 70% are from external people. And the reason for that is largely because mechanization is sort of a very sexy subject to some of the external researchers. I mean, since Professor Dumont, the French philosopher, wrote about 1966, a false start in Africa, and pointed out this grave years for machinery. This has been a recurring thing to most external. So people don't look at success cases in Africa, they look at failures. And that has been in terms of publication. But there are success cases in Africa, quite a number of them actually, but they never reach the press or the publication stage. I can cite just a few. Grain milling. We've virtually succeeded in grain milling using hammer mills, and all the small mills are all over East and Southern Africa, West Africa. We have succeeded very well in that. There are also districts within countries in sub-Saharan Africa where land preparation is up to 90% is done by tractors. I think we should take those districts and learn from them and try to publicize them, that there are success cases also. It's not only failures. The problem with mechanization is that we've tended to focus only on the failures, and that has been our major weakness. And I suggest that we take this idea of having more students doing research projects, learn from the success cases, publicize them, prepare dissertation papers and so forth, so that at least we get encouraged also. Because if you only, what you read about mechanization is failure, obviously you will fail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Mrema. I would have loved to go back to our experts for their concluding remarks, but we have run out of time. So unfortunately, I will not be able to come back to you, but I would like to thank you very much for the rich insights that you shared with us. And at this point, let me go to Joseph to tell us a bit more about the upcoming webinars. But Joseph, maybe before you go to the upcoming webinars, you may address the question asked by Adam about what kind of support is there from FAO and other organizations. Please, Joseph.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much, colleagues, for this very, good discussion that we have had today. Regarding the question from Adam, I think, FAO and especially our mechanization team is offering support in preparation of national agricultural mechanization strategies, but also providing technical support in different aspects of mechanization. So I suggest that Adam just share his email in the chat, and then I will get in touch with him for more discussion. And also, I think he has my email already, josephmpagalile@fao.org. Regarding the next steps, I think I will be very brief, just to mention that the next webinar in the series will be on financing, innovative financing models for agricultural mechanization in sub-Saharan Africa. So we are also going to have a discussion paper and a keynote presentation on innovative financing, and they will have at least 3 discussants who will be discussing again that topic. It's a very interesting topic, and I invite all of us who are here today to also make time to join that webinar, which will be towards the end of this month, end of May. Thank you so much, and over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much. So the message from Joseph is that we have not finished eating the agricultural mechanization meal yet. So there's more to come. So please take note. We will be coming back to you to participate in the subsequent webinars. So at this point, I think I would like to invite, do we have Dr. Simplice Nuala Fonko from AUC with us? Is Simplice around to give us the closing remarks?
Yes.
Yes, I think he's around. He has raised his hand.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Simplice, who is also my former boss at the African Union Commission. So thank you. And you are the head of Agriculture and Food Security Division at the Department of Agriculture at the African Union Commission. So please, you have the floor for your closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Mark. With your permission, I can switch on my video. If not, I will have a bad or poor quality.
Hello, Simplice. I think I cannot hear you.
Yes, I think now it's getting back.
It's better now, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Le docteur Patrice Tala, mon frère, coordinateur sous-régional de la FAO pour l'Afrique australe et représentant de la FAO au Zimbabwe. L'ingénieur Saidi Komha, directeur exécutif du réseau Africa Conservation Tillage. Chers présentateurs, panélistes, distingués participants, mesdames et messieurs. Je voudrais commencer par vous remercier tous pour votre active participation à cette autre série de webinaires sur la mécanisation en Afrique. Pour cet événement, et pour vous montrer un peu l'intérêt que cela suscite, la discussion autour de la mécanisation en Afrique, nous avons environ 300 participants qui se sont fait enregistrer, venant de 60 pays, dont 34 en Afrique, et quand même 18% des participants enregistrés étaient des femmes. Je pense que cela démontre encore davantage l'intérêt que nous tous nous plaçons à cet événement. Je voudrais tout particulièrement remercier les organisateurs de cet événement, c'est-à-dire la FAO et le African Conservation Tillage, qui se sont joints à l'Union africaine pour pouvoir organiser cet événement. Je voudrais remercier particulièrement nos présentateurs, le professeur Jeffrey, nos différents panélistes, le professeur Linus, le professeur Lawrence, le docteur Alioun et M. Halmet. Je ne voudrais pas oublier les interprètes sans qui nous n'aurons pas pu communiquer. Donc, je voudrais remercier ces interprètes pour nous avoir facilité la communication. Et effectivement, je voudrais aussi remercier de manière toute particulière notre commissaire, la commissaire à l'agriculture, développement rural et environnement et économie à la Commission de l'Union africaine, qui vraiment prend le leadership, qui nous pousse à pouvoir opérationnaliser ce cadre de la mécanisation agricole en Afrique qui a été adopté par les chefs d'État et la coopération que nous entretenons avec la FAO et le African Conservation Tillage est ici bien à remercier. Mesdames et messieurs, et comme vous l'avez vu pendant les présentations et les discussions, des années 60 jusqu'aux années 70, l'Afrique avait un peu plus de tracteurs en utilisation que les autres pays ou les continents. Si je veux citer le Brésil, la Chine, l'Inde et la Thaïlande. Et tous les tracteurs étaient pratiquement utilisés par du secteur privé ou par des coopératives. Et les gouvernements avaient pratiquement moins de 10% de la flotte générale de tracteurs en utilisation. Cependant, depuis les années 2000, des continents comme des pays comme l'Inde, la Chine et le Brésil ont, pour certains, un peu plus de 7 fois plus de tracteurs que l'Afrique. Les papiers ou les documents qui ont été préparés et qui ont servi à l'organisation de ces webinaires nous ont certainement parlé non seulement des problèmes et des défis que connaissent la mécanisation en Afrique, mais aussi nous ont proposé des solutions. Et il faut toutefois reconnaître que la réduction dans l'investissement public à la recherche, et cela est revenu plusieurs fois, le problème lié aux ressources humaines, et ceci surtout facilité par la réduction des inscriptions dans des universités ou les cours d'ingénierie agricole ces dernières années, sont des phénomènes qu'il ne faut pas négliger. Et il faudrait aussi probablement ajouter la pandémie actuelle de la COVID-19 qui non seulement a affecté tout le tissu économique de nos pays, mais a aussi démontré la faiblesse du système alimentaire en Afrique et probablement a pointé du doigt la nécessité de travailler à accélérer la mécanisation agricole sur le continent. Pour notre part, au niveau de l'Union africaine, nous avons pris comme engagement de pouvoir avancer la mécanisation sur le continent avec nos partenaires. Et ceci est beaucoup plus reflété par cette grande campagne que la commissaire a lancée et qui était une volonté du leadership de la Commission, la campagne de confinement de la roue au musée d'ici 2025. Nous nous disons, d'ici 2025, il faudrait que cela se fasse. Il faudrait que d'ici 2025, que la mécanisation en Afrique soit une réalité. Mesdames, Messieurs, je voudrais, avant de conclure, et pour montrer un peu quels sont les engagements que l'Union africaine prend en vue d'avancer la mécanisation sur le continent, vous informer que, en collaboration avec les différents partenaires, nous sommes en train actuellement d'accompagner les États membres et les communautés économiques régionales à la connexion des données pour la production du 3e rapport de la revue biannuelle du CADEP. Vous savez que ce rapport contient des données liées à la mécanisation en Afrique. C'est un des indicateurs que nous collectons. Malheureusement, dans la rédaction du rapport, nous ne mettons pas trop d'accent sur le détail. Pour le 3e rapport, il a été décidé qu'à partir des données collectées pour ce rapport, nous allons préparer un petit rapport vraiment succinct au chef d'État sur l'état de la mise en œuvre des différentes décisions qu'ils prennent.
Et une de ces décisions, c'est effectivement l'adoption du cadre de la mécanisation agricole durable en Afrique. Donc, le troisième rapport de la revue biannuelle du CADEP contiendra une partie qui parlera de l'état d'avancement de la mécanisation en Afrique et surtout fera à nos décideurs politiques des propositions sur des options politiques fortes à prendre afin d'avancer la mécanisation en Afrique. Je voudrais donc vous inviter tous les participants à participer activement à la collecte de données dans les pays, leur collecte et leur validation au niveau national et régional, mais surtout à participer de manière très active à la discussion qui aura lieu avant et pendant la réunion ministérielle qui se tiendra en octobre de cette année, afin de s'accorder sur des options politiques qui seront transmises à nos chefs d'État. Sur ce, je voudrais encore vous remercier tous d'avoir participé à cette discussion et déclarer ce webinaire officiellement clos. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simplice Nwala Funko, for the closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of this webinar. My name is Mark Finn. I've been your moderator. I'm with the FAO Sub-Regional Office for Southern Africa, based in Harare, Zimbabwe. Thank you and see you again for the subsequent webinars. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.